Sunday nights we are studying Revelation. We've gone through well in excess of 20 tapes on Revelation. And it took us to the book of Daniel. Daniel and Revelation are considered, and I consider Ezekiel goes along with these books, but most of the scholars or the people who are studying the Bible consider Revelation and Daniel to be together, and they are. And the main reason is because you find the beast in the book of Daniel, and you find the beast in Revelation. And, goodness, what am I doing? In Revelation, you find the beast, and you find the beast in the book of Daniel. And you find in Daniel, you also find the last half of the 70th week. You find the 70 weeks of Daniel, and showing you how the 70 weeks are measured out and what they are. And you also find in Daniel the times, and dividing of times, and that is 3.5 years. A time being a year, times being 2 years, that's 3 years, and dividing of times being a half a year. So that's 3.5 years. And then you find also in Daniel 9:27, you find that in the midst of the 70th week, you find the sacrifice and the oblation ceasing. Of course, we don't believe here, I don't believe, and I'm going to teach this, that if there is a temple being built in Israel, a temple during the last 7 years, it will not be the temple of God, because that will be a denial that we're the temple of God. And when God says, I change not, shana, that means to duplicate or mutate. God's not going to have two different temples. We're the temple of God. And then you got a temple over there in Jerusalem. And then they start offering a lamb. And Jesus was the one sacrifice offered once for all in Hebrews, the 10th chapter. So if they start offering a lamb, that will be a denial that Jesus is the Lamb of God, like John said, won't it? So anyone who starts offering a lamb, when you see this time and dividing of times, and you see the sacrifice and the oblation ceasing in the midst of the week, or at the 3.5 year point in Daniel 9:27, 3.5 year point, when you see that happen, and in that point, it cannot be in this temple here, and that cannot even be a temple of God, even if the Jews built a temple. First of all, the Dome of the Rock is sitting on the Temple Mount, and they go building a Jewish temple on the Temple Mount, and there will be World War III and nuclear warheads going everywhere, because the Arabs have got that occupied already. So I keep saying that the 70th week will come at the end of time, but it will be the sacrifice and the oblation ceasing in the temple of God. We're the temple of God. We have our bodies a living sacrifice. The oblation was the bread offering that was offered every day with the sacrifice. And we, the church, 1 Corinthians 10:17, we being many are one bread and one body. Here's the bread right here that's going to cause to cease. Reading of the Word of God and going out and taking your cross and telling people the truth and figuratively dying for it. They'll outlaw that and say, you can't even do that anymore. So this is where the sacrifice and the oblation will cease. And when Jack Van Wimpy and his wife Wren, Wren and Wimpy Van Stimpy, or Wren and Stimpy Van Impy, when they come together, and when he comes up and says in 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, and I heard a prophecy teacher the other day quote this. I can't remember who it was. And every one of them that quote it, they don't even know what they're doing. When you go to 2 Thessalonians, 2nd chapter, and you see here in 2 Thessalonians, 2nd chapter, let no man deceive you by any means. For that day shall not come except there come a falling away first. The day of the Lord spoken of in verse 1. And that's just a continuation of the day of the Lord in verse 7 and 8 of the previous chapter. You who are troubled, rest with us when the Lord Jesus shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels. And then he says, in flaming fire, taking vengeance on all those that know not God, that know not God, and that obey not the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Well, that's the day he's talking about. The day of the Lord will not come except there come an apostasis, a falling away. Apostasis. And it comes from stasis, meaning to stand. And from stasis we get stauros, S-T-A-U-R-O-S. And that is the word cross. Well, this word stasis means to stand, or it means to cause controversy. And when we stand for truth, we cause controversy. And apo means the removal of standing or removal of controversy. There won't be any more controversy when that's removed. There has to be a falling away first. And then he says, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth. Now, when you get to verse 4, Hal Lindsey and Jack Van Impe and these guys say this is the sacrifice and the oblation ceasing. Verse 4 of chapter 2 of 2 Thessalonians. They say this is the 3.5 year point of a future happening, and it can't be. Has anybody heard anybody preach on this verse? Huh? Yeah. Well, they will preach on it, and they'll say, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, the man of sin, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. They say, see, that's a future of the man of sin setting himself up in a Jewish temple over here in Jerusalem during the last half, at the 3.5 year point, during the last half of the 70th week. Well, they don't say 70th week. During the last half of the tribulation period is the way they put it. Well, it cannot possibly be this over here, because opposeth is a participle. Opposeth, a participle is a verbal adjective. It has verbal character. A verb has tense. Present, past, future, future perfect, past perfect, so forth. Who opposeth, a participle. This is the opposing man of sin. Opposeth, being a participle, has verbal tense. It's present tense. Being present tense, it means that at the time that Paul wrote this, he was already opposing God in the temple of God. Well, what's the temple of God? Us. And exalteth himself above all that is called God. Exalteth is a participle. It is also present tense. It is, well, where do you get that? Well, you look it up in your interlinear Bible, then you go over to your parsing guide, your analytical lection, look it up, and it will tell you it's present tense. So he's already opposing. This is the opposing man of sin, exalting man of sin, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth. Sitteth is an infinitive. An infinitive is a verbal noun. It is a noun, nonetheless, but it is verbal in character, and it has tense. Since it's verbal in character, it's present tense too. So he sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Showing is a participle. It is present tense. So Paul is talking about this man of sin is already sitting in the temple of God. He's saying the apostasy has already started, isn't he? Well, we know the apostasy had started early in the church. Even Mr. Pond says it really started at the end of the 2nd century, when the primitive early church began to turn themselves over to synods and councils, or over to conventions and associations. What rises at the top of association or a convention is the best politician. Well, he says this. He says, remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things, and now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. What is it that's holding? Withholdeth is the word kateko, K-A-T-E-C-H-O. Kateko comes from kata, which means, it has several meanings, but in this case it means down. Sometimes it can mean with intensity. Well, this word kata in this case means down, and echo is a word in the Greek. It means to hold. Hold. I'm holding this eraser. It means to hold down. He says, now you know what's holding the church down and keeping them from going out to meet the Lord in the air, as verse 1 says, our gathering together to Him. Now you know what's holding the church down. The man of sin has to be exposed and revealed for who he is. I just simply brought that. I don't want to go. Well, let me just go ahead and say this. When you get to verse 7, the opposing, exalting, sitting, and showing, all being present tense, participles, and infinitives. When you get to verse 7, he says, the mystery of iniquity is already working in the temple of God. That's what he's saying. He says it's already here. Why these guys don't bother? Well, first of all, they're dispensationalists, and they don't think it's important to find out the tenses of these verbs and these infinitives and participles. He says, now you know. He says, for the mystery of iniquity, there's two mysteries, the mystery of Christ, which is the church, and the mystery of iniquity, which is sin. And the man of sin is the head of that. So there's two things have to happen. The apostasy, which has already started when Paul wrote this. He said it's already here. The mystery already works. He's already sitting in the temple of God, which temple you are. And the church is already falling away. Well, isn't that the reason for Paul's letters? Every letter was written because they were having problems with their maturity, and they were falling away and getting involved in all kinds of craziness, Essenism, and all kinds of occultic things. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth. Well, that word letteth is the same word as withholdeth in verse 6. It's the word kateko. Only he that holds down will hold down until the man of sin be taken away, and then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. And most of the dispensationalists say, well, at the beginning of the tribulation, he's going to be revealed. Revealed. No, he's not. Revealed is the word apocalypto. Apocalypto means to take off the cover. The cover's not going to be taken off, and he's going to be exposed for who he is at the beginning of the tribulation. They think revealed means they're going to make an announcement and come on the news and say, man of sin comes on the scene, and newspapers, man of sin here to breathe fire upon you. No. Revealed means at the end of time when he's exposed, and Jesus will destroy with the brightness of his coming. And that's the same thing he's talking about in verse 8 of verse chapter 1, in flaming fire. The brightness of his coming, verse 8 of both chapters. Verse 8 of chapter 2 refers back to verse 8 of chapter 1. Then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Refer back to verse 8. In flaming fire, taking vengeance on all them that know not God, that obey not the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. So the mystery of iniquity, two things have to happen. The apostasy, when he says falling away, let me just point this out to you. He says the falling away has to come first. And he says in verse 4, he says the falling away has to come first in verse 3. The falling away is the man of sin lifting himself up in the temple of God, or in the church at that time, causing them to apostatize. So that the falling away is referring to opposing, exalting, sitting, showing himself. And that's also reference to verse 7, the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Those three things go together. The apostasy, the man of sin opposing, exalting, sitting and showing, and the mystery of iniquity already working. They're all the same thing. Can you see that? Huh? Okay. Now, all right. now get back to what I was saying. I just simply brought that out. They try to tell you, because of the tense of those participles and the tense of that infinitive, it cannot possibly be the causing of the sacrifice and the oblation to cease down here. This is not going to be a falling away here when the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. That's going to be outlawed. It's not just going to be a falling away from the truth. You understand what I just said? At the midway point, it's going to be against the law. He will cause the sacrifice in this temple to cease. He'll say, you cannot go out in public. We got a world that's in trouble, and you're out here starting trouble, Jim Brown. You and your followers are not allowed to go out in public. We passed a law against this, and the United States no longer has a constitution, and you've lost your constitutional rights. And we're trying to feed the world and take care of a people, and you're not going to go out there and cause trouble while we're trying to do some great honorable thing for the world with our God, and they're going to be claiming to worship the same God. Whew. We're headed for something.
You ought to read 10, 11, 12, 13.
10, 11, Mary likes that.
I love that.
Even him who, verse 9, God's going to destroy with the brightness of his coming. That's the revelation of Christ and of the man of sin. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause, they didn't receive the love of the truth. But where do you get the love or the agape of the truth?
Right.
All right?
You can't go get it.
You can't go get it because the love of God is shed abroad in our heart, and that word is agape. God has to write that in our hearts. That's walking in God's commandments. And for the fact that God hasn't written the agape in their hearts, there in Romans the 5th chapter, God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who have believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Now that's strong, isn't it? But we are bound to give thanks always to God for you, brethren, beloved of the Lord, because God hath from the beginning chosen you to salvation through sanctification of the Spirit and belief of the truth. Yeah, those are strong words, aren't they? Now, let me get back to this. The reason we're talking about this is you got in Daniel 9:27 the sacrifice and the oblation ceasing at the 3.5 year point. You got the times and dividing of time, which is the same thing as Daniel 9:27. And then Daniel 11, you've got the man of sin, the Old Testament picture of the man of sin, Antiochus Epiphanes, who goes into the temple of God. Now, I don't have time to go into it. I got to get it back to 70 weeks. But when he goes down here to attack Egypt, the Roman emissary meets him here on Cyprus, tells him, don't you dare go down there and attack. We're the Roman army. We'll destroy you. So he goes back, gets mad, goes back to the temple in Jerusalem, heard that a rumor had been going around Jerusalem that he was dead, and they were rejoicing in Jerusalem. So he goes back there and he defiles the temple of God in Jerusalem. Why would you have a defiling of a literal temple here and a literal temple here when everything over here is spiritual and everything over here is literal? You wouldn't. Even if they build a temple in Jerusalem, it won't be a temple of God. If they start offering a lamb, it will not be a lamb sacrifice. And it couldn't be abomination, B-D-E-L-U-G-M-A. B-E-D-L-U-G-M-A. That's the word abomination. When you find that, when you see the abomination of desolation there in the prophecy chapters of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Matthew 24, Mark the 13th chapter, Luke 21, when you see this abomination that makes desolate, it's the word delegma, and it means to stink. Well, it will not stink in the nostrils of God to stop a literal sacrifice being offered in a false temple when that lamb will be a denial that Jesus is the true lamb. I don't know why. Isn't that really simple? How could anybody come up and say, oh, that'll be an abomination to stop the lamb over here in a Jewish temple? No, it won't. That is no way it could be an abomination. That would be a righteous thing to stop a lamb being offered when Jesus is the one lamb offered once for all, wouldn't it? Why hasn't people thought of that? Just amazes me how simple some things can be, and they don't think of it. That's right. Well, you've got in Revelation 11 and 12, you got the time and dividing of times. You got 1,260 days where the church will be under siege. And 1,260 days is exactly half of 7 years on a 360-day Jewish calendar. And then you got 42 months, which is also half of 7 years on any calendar. Now, that's why we're tying together Daniel, that and a lot of other reasons. Now, I want us to get back to the 70 weeks. Let me see if I can't cut out some things that it's awful hard to cut out a lot of things. Now, I want us to get to the fourth decree. The fourth decree. I'm going to cover in this series, we're going to go back and tie in the 70 weeks with Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. And we're going to tie in these chapters particularly with the 70 weeks. I used to be on the road as a young preacher back in the 60s, 64, 65, 66, 67. And I'd preach on the 70 weeks and I'd preach on these. I kept trying to tie them together. And boy, it was a wrestling match for a lot of years. I'm trying to give you a shortcut. I want to show you how they come together. And I'm going to go into some things on preterism and why I don't believe in that. Preterism is one of the worst doctrines that men have come up with in a long time. Huh? Preterism, yeah. A preterist, a Hebrew preterist verb is a past tense verb. They're trying to say that all of these things took place in 70 AD. All the prophecies of these chapters right here took place in 70 AD. That's past. So it's all past, and there's nothing to be fulfilled. It's craziness is what it is. Now, all right, we've been talking about, let's go to the 70 weeks. Let's go back to Daniel 9:24. Daniel's in the captivity. Daniel was carried away at about 12 years old. Daniel is getting to be, this is in the first year of Darius, king of Persia. This is Darius' first year. And Daniel 9. Now, Darius rises to power. If you've got a Thompson Chain Bible, they've got out to the side here dates on it. Mine's got 538 BC, and that is absolutely wrong. Well, some of mine has been printed bad, I guess. Good. I'm glad you just got 522 because
that's a notation. I took from you.
Yeah. Well, do anybody have a Thompson chain?
Yeah, this is
What does it say? What does it say printed?
538.
It's wrong.
You told us 538.
Yeah, it's wrong. That's wrong. Because, let me set it up again. Darius is the king here, isn't he? Okay. Well, Babylon overthrows Israel in 586. Overthrows southern Judah in 586 BC. Northern Israel's already been carried captive in 722 BC. I'm glad I brought this out. I never even stop and paid attention to look at it, but I said 538, that's wrong. It's bad printing. Either bad printing or the guy that's writing it out is a little confused. That's why I put the question mark. I don't always agree with everything notes. You have to learn to evaluate. If you look at enough, I don't know how to say this to you, but a lot of times you look at a McClintock and Strong in this volume, they'll say something that disagrees with this volume over here. You know why? Because the guy that wrote this volume, two different guys. Or the group of guys that wrote this one are different than the group of guys that put these together. And you'll read books and you'll have somebody say this and this and this. We know when Darius started ruling. We know that southern Judah was carried away in 586 by Babylon. And we know historically that it was Cyrus in 539 BC, that it was Cyrus in 539 that that conquered Babylon. And then we know it was Cyrus that gave the first decree in 538 BC. And then we know he ruled until 530 BC. And his son Cambyses ruled until 522 BC. And Darius starts ruling there. And we know that's the dates on it. So when you see that, you can mark that out in your Bible. Darius' first year was 522 to 521 BC. That's Darius' first year. So when it says, in the first year of Darius, I never even looked at that, 538. Sometimes I'll pay attention. If they're right, I'll call them out. But that's wrong in your Bible. If you got Thompson chain, just scratch it out and put 522. That's the first year of Darius. Well, it's in the first year of Darius that Daniel gets this decree, or gets this 70 weeks given to him. And Daniel is crying out to the Lord and saying, how long, O Lord, are we going to be in Babylon? How long will we be in captivity? Well, we know the story. Israel was a nation for 500 years under kings, about 280 years or so under judges. And all the time that they were a nation, God gives them a law under Moses when he brings them out of Egypt. If you're not obedient to me, I'll send 4 judgments, the sword, the famine, the pestilence, over and over. When you're disobedient to me, and finally I'll send the beast, which is Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, to carry you away into captivity. That's why the beast of the lion, the bear, and the leopard, the beast, and the beast with iron teeth of Daniel 7 is the same thing as the lion, bear, and leopard of Revelation, the 13th chapter. It is a system, it's not a man. Now, all right, where am I? First decree was given in 538 BC, and the big argument I don't know how these guys can be scholars. The big argument was whether the 70 weeks of Daniel, and these guys try to spiritualize this and get spiritual and say stupid, goofy things. They do not believe that the Bible is mathematically exact. That's what they don't believe. I believe it's mathematically exact. Whenever I speak of the orge, O-R-G, Ada, and that's the word wrath. God had to point us to wrath. When you end a word in the Ada, or if it's A-N, the Ada on the end of a word is always feminine gender. And even some scholars and some Greek books will say, well, God's wrath can be the orge. No, it cannot. He's not a female. I believe God is that exact. Now, some of the words orge, when you look at them, it looks like it's the wrath of God. Well, when you really examine it, when you get into Mark, the 2nd chapter, and you go into the 3rd chapter, and Jesus looks around those, I don't need to go into this. Let's just put it this way. When you find the orge ends with an Ada, it's no way it can be God the Father's wrath or Jesus' wrath, because he's a male and so is the Father and so is the Holy Spirit. So, but it looks like some of the verses look like, well, when you examine them, and I'll talk to you after church about it, but I believe God is exact, and that's why these guys can't get these dates right.
That's found in Mark 2nd and what else? Just make a note on it. Mark 2nd chapter and what else?
Well, it's awful. If you just go looking at it, you ain't going to understand it. If I give it, well, I'll give it to you. I'll give you a little bit of it. Goodness sakes. Mark the 3rd chapter, verse 5. I'll just say this. This is Jesus. After he'd healed the man that was sick of the palsy in the 2nd chapter, and the Sadducees and the Pharisees are furious with Jesus. And then he says to them in verse 4 of chapter 3, he saith to them, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath days? He healed this man on the Sabbath, or to do evil or save life? or to kill, but they held their peace. And when he had looked round about on them with anger. Sounds like Jesus is angry with them, doesn't it? And that word anger is orge. Jesus didn't look on them with his anger because they were already enraged at him. And it's feminine gender because Babylon mothered all idolatry, and this is a Babylonian anger. It's a let us make us a name anger, and they're mad at him. They are enraged at him for healing that man on the Sabbath that was sick of the palsy in the previous chapter. So when he looks around on them who have the orge, or they are angry with the orge, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts. He's grieved, but he's not angry. They are angry at him from the previous chapter, but it looks like when you read that, he looked around on them, and most of the scholars that read this will say Jesus had the anger. And if you get a lot of the super scholars to comment on this, they'll say, see, this can be feminine. God can have feminine anger. No, he doesn't have feminine anger here. He's a male, isn't he? You better examine this, and you can't interpret this in the light of verse 5. You got to go back to verse 2, not chapter 3, but chapter 2. The Sadducees are already enraged at him for healing on the Sabbath. Jesus looked around on them that were with the anger, that were with the orge. Can you see that? Ain't no way you're going to convince me that God's a female or he's got female anger anywhere. I don't believe that. And I look at the greatest Greek scholar in the world and say, mister, you don't know what you're talking about. The reason they can't find these things in Scripture, they don't believe God is that exact. I do. And that I can't believe. And I've read out of some of my Greek books, and they'll say, well, God's anger can be feminine. No, it can't. I'm going, how in the world can a living God... I just couldn't figure out how to put these words together without me being female.
Is that first person or second person or third?
Well, he looked around on them with anger. Well, them would be third person. Now, all right, and that's the point I'm getting at. Now, here's what gets me. Let's read, first of all, let's read the 70 weeks. Let's just read this out of Daniel 9:20. Y'all need two Bibles like I do. I got the Daniel 70 weeks right here, and I got Nehemiah opened right here. I'm ready to go in both places. All right.
Jim did finish that statement. The biggest argument is whether the 70 weeks of Daniel...
I'm going to get right back to it. I'm just going to read this. I'm going to get right back to that. Come right back to it. Okay. Daniel 9. Daniel's in Babylon. The Lord says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, Daniel, and thy holy city. Daniel's people are the Jews, or the Israelites. The holy city is Jerusalem, isn't it? To do 6 things. Finish the transgression where they went after Baal in the grove, where they transgressed against God and never kept their sabbatical years, a sabbatical year every 7 years. Every 7 years. And that was so the ground could restore the nutrients. They burned the ground up. And God said, you keep on going against my laws. You burned the ground up. You didn't keep the sabbatical years. You pressed the widow and the orphan and the poor. And he said, I'm not going to put up with it. Well, he carries them away into Babylon. Has Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar to carry them to Babylon, not to destroy them, but to get them away from the land so he can bring them back and keep his covenant with them. He even says that repeatedly. I'm going to call you back from the captivity. So he says, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Well, we know that when this happens, Israel is going to be spiritual. And we know when John stood on the Jordan River and was crying, repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That's Israel. They'd been scattered and they'd never come back. But he was talking about a spiritual Israel, a spiritual kingdom, wasn't he? And the fact that he's crying to Israel, repent, means they haven't ever repented of all their sin over here. That means the 70 weeks are definitely not up yet, are they? No, sir. Now, and he said there's a method of measuring out these 70 weeks. Let me put it real simple, and I promise I won't add to this. I'm just going to put it up here as simple as I can put it. While they were a kingdom, for 490 years, 70 sets of these sabbatical years, they never kept those sabbatical years. 70 times 7 is 490. So 490 years, they never kept the sabbatical years. And what went along with that was ignoring the statutes of God. So God says, I'll put you in Babylon for 70 years. All 70 of those years, one right after the other. And he said, if you don't repent, and you won't, because I'm going to fix your mind so you won't, so I can call my elect Gentile church, what I'll do is I'll take these 70 sets of sabbatical years, and I'll measure them out to you. I'm going to measure them out, 490 years, where they never kept their sabbatical years. And the sabbatical years was, without a doubt, one of the most important things in God's covenant, because, you got to remember this, because when he says look at it in Deuteronomy 28, here's why. Here's why the 70, here's the promise of God. And how many times have we read this? How many times? Deuteronomy 28. I'm not going to read the curses in the last half of this chapter. I'm just going to read this. It shall come to pass, if thou wilt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and do all his commandments, including the sabbatical years, which I command thee this day. And he's given this land to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob's name's changed to Israel. The Lord thy God will set thee on high above all the nations of the earth. You will be the rulers of the world. That's why they were called the heavens. The heavens meant the ruling class. And all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. Blessed shalt thou be in the city, blessed shalt thou be in the field. If they don't keep the sabbatical years and they burn up their crops, they can't be blessed in their field, can they? That's impossible. Blessed shall be the fruit of thy body, your babies, coming out of your womb. That's why, I can't remember which one y'all told me. Jim Reynolds said in that last few verses of Hosea the 13th chapter, when God says, I'll bring judgment on you, and I'll have those Assyrian soldiers come in and rip those babies out of your bellies and dash their brains out on those cobblestone streets of Jerusalem. Well, blessed shall be the fruit of thy body. God says, I won't pity you. You had no pity for me, for my name. So I'll destroy the fruit of your body. Literally, I'll abort those babies by those Assyrian warriors coming in. And Marianne said one night, she said, that's kind of why Jesus said, take no thought for your life, what you'll eat or what you'll drink. Yeah, that's it. Keep the covenant of God. Seek the kingdom of God. He'll take care of the food. That's what he says here, doesn't he? And the clothing. He said, the fruit of thy ground. How are you going to have the fruit of the ground when you burn the ground up? And the fruit of thy cattle, the increase of thy kind, the flocks of sheep. You got nothing to feed the sheep, nothing to feed the cattle. You got no rain, you got no water, because you're going against God and he's sending sword, famine, and pestilence. How can he fulfill this? Blessed shall be thy basket and thy store. Basket means as they go out, the baskets will be full of the biggest ears of corn and fruit that you can find. How can that be when you're burning the ground up? That's why he said, I got to get you out of the land. I can't fulfill this covenant with you the way you're doing. And thy storehouse. You ain't going to have any storehouse if you burn the ground up, are you? The 70 weeks of Daniel is directly associated to the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy. Isn't it? And then he says, blessed shalt thou be when thou come in and when you go out. And the Lord shall cause thine enemies to rise up against thee, to be smitten before thy face, and they shall come out against thee one way and flee before thee 7 ways. And it could be the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Roman Empire. Don't matter how many there are. I got enough lightning bolts. I've got enough earthquakes to kill all of them. But if you're not obedient to me and you don't hearken unto me, I said I wasn't going to read this, but I guess I need to. Verse 15 of the same chapter. If you do not hearken unto the Lord thy God to do all his commandments and his statutes, which shall command thee this day, all these curses shall overtake thee. You'll be cursed in the city. You'll be cursed in the field. Well, that's part of the covenant, isn't it? But they burn the ground up, and they're not keeping the law of God, the sabbatical years. How are they going to have a field full of harvest? They're not. Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. You'll go out like Haggai said. You'll go out and gather much and bring in little. It'll be like the dust of the ground. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body. God said, I'll rip the babies out of your bellies before they're born. Boy, that sounds cruel, doesn't it? That's part of his covenant. And the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind, the flocks of thy sheep. You'll be cursed when you go out and come in, cursing, vexation, rebuke. Boy, this doesn't sound like Kenneth Copeland's message, does it? And all that thou settest thine hand to do, there until thou be destroyed. He's not talking to pagans, he's talking to Israel. And until thou perish quickly because of the wickedness of thy doings, whereby thou hast forsaken me, and the Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee. I think pestilence is disease, isn't it? And they say, God won't make anybody sick. You guys are dumb, you know. Until he hath consumed thee from off the land whither thou goest, the Lord shall smite thee with a consumption, with a fever, with inflammation, with extreme burning. Boy, that sounds sick, doesn't it? It says, the Lord shall smite thee. Back in verse 21, the Lord shall make pestilence. It is the Lord. Verse 20, the Lord shall send upon thee all this cursing and vexation. It's the Lord that's going to do it, not the devil. Is it? They say God won't hurt anybody. He'll kill 1 million people, but he won't hurt them. Now, I'm going to kill y'all, but I ain't going to hurt you. Besides that, Micah 6:13, therefore will I make thee sick in smiting thee, Israel, because of thy sins, with extreme burning, with the sword, with blasting, with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. And the heaven as that over thy head shall be brass. There'll be no rain. You might as well have a brass helmet over your head. Live under a brass awning the rest of your life. Covers the entire nation, because I ain't going to bring any rain. Oh, man, I guess so. And the earth that is under thee shall be like iron. I have seen West Texas when I was a kid, when they'd have droughts, and man, the ruts would be so deep, and it would dry as hard as a rock, just like put in an oven, that West Texas sun. And you can kick it, and you can't break it, and you can't grow nothing in it. Huh?
That caused the Dust Bowl.
That's exactly what caused the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma. And then he says, I want to show you this again because I want you to understand this is tied to the 70 weeks of Daniel. And the Lord shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. From heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. He said, I'm going to send all this pestilence, all this sword, all this famine. And the last thing I'm going to do is send the beast to carry you away into Babylon because you haven't done what I said. And then he says, the Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. That is the exact opposite of verse 7 of this same chapter. Verse 7 says, if you're obedient, the Lord shall cause thine enemies that rise up against thee to be smitten before thy face. They'll come out against you 1 way, and they'll flee 7 ways. But he said in verse 1, the last phrase, thy God shall set thee on high above all the nations of the earth if you're obedient, but if not, verse 25, the Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies, and thou shalt go out 1 way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and shalt remove you. Babylon's going to come in and take you away captive into all the kingdoms of the earth. So this is directly connected to the 70 weeks of Daniel, isn't it? Directly connected. Because the 70 weeks is about the 70 times 7 that they never kept. Well, if you don't keep the sabbatical years, you're not going to keep anything else, are you? And they didn't. I know it. They're not keeping God's laws now. It's a wonder God don't kill this nation, blow it up. I don't know why He don't drop a bomb on it big as this nation. We've got the sword, the famine, the pestilence, the beast here right now. That's right. It's coming. Now, let's look. It is what's going on. Pestilence is everywhere. Disease is everywhere. The sword is everywhere. War is everywhere, and there are no answers. The Bible says there will be distress of nations with perplexity at the end of time. And we are perplexed, aporia, with no answer. No remedy, marpe, no cure. Isn't it funny? What are the presidential candidates running on? A cure. They're going to cure the economy. They're going to cure the problems. They're going to cure, and they're going to cure nothing.
Clint said today on the news that she's going to, the middle class, what we are getting, going to do something or other to give us more money.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. They're all going to fix it. Ain't nobody going to fix anything. Jesus said there will be no fixing. God said in the 36th chapter of 2 Chronicles, no remedy, no cure. Proverbs 29:1. The man that stiffens his neck, who'll be suddenly cut off in that without remedy. Is America got a stiff neck? Yeah, they do. They're stiff-necked. Now, the 70 weeks of Daniel are measured out in verse 25 of chapter 9 of Daniel. Know therefore and understand, Daniel. This is Gabriel talking to Daniel. Gabriel is Daniel's messenger. That from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem. There has to be a commandment to restore and build Jerusalem. Well, here's how God's going to measure it out. He's going to measure out. He says, okay, Israel will not go back. I'll harden their hearts so they won't go back. Only 50,000 went back, approximately 50, a little under that in the 2nd chapter of Ezra. And they didn't go back. They didn't repent. That's why John is standing on the banks of the Jordan shouting, repent. He says, I've got a method that I'm going to measure out these 70 weeks. There's going to be 2 sections of it. All right. During that 70-year period, here's the period. Israel never kept their sabbatical years. They're under judges before that. Before the judges, they were 40 years in the wilderness. Before that, 400 years in Egypt. Now, here's the way it's going to be measured out. Verse 25, Daniel 9. From the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, 80 and 2 weeks. All right. A score is 20. 3 to 20 is 60. 62 plus 7 is 69 weeks will be measured out. And these are weeks of years because they are these sabbatical weeks where they had a sabbatical year every 7 years. Now, he said, here's the way I'm going to measure it out. 69 of the weeks are going to end at Messiah the Prince, but they're going to start from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem. Jerusalem. We've already studied these 3 decrees to rebuild the temple and why these guys don't understand that the 70 weeks cannot start with Cyrus' decree. It cannot start with Darius' decree. And it cannot start with Artaxerxes' first decree. Mainly because Cyrus, here's the thing. Let me just it cannot start with Cyrus' decree. Let me get my notes here, because I put this on the board one night, but I don't think one time is enough. It can't start with this Cyrus' decree because Cyrus' decree was in 538 BC. 69 weeks, when you multiply that times 7, is 483 years. Messiah the Prince is when Jesus comes into Jerusalem. Jesus comes into Jerusalem. He's presented to Israel as the Prince A prince is one who is to be made king. And in Matthew 21, they are shouting, Hosanna. Hosanna means God save the king. Here comes our king. They're throwing branches before him, the palm branches. That was a sign of victory of a king coming in to conquer a nation. Let me give you something they did. All the kings would ride on the young colt of an ass. That's because the young colt of an ass was the most sure-footed animal. That's why when you go out to Grand Canyon and you're going to go down the side of that mountain and there's a straight drop off 1,000 feet, you have to get on the back of one of those young ass colts, and they are not going to fall. Now, I don't believe that. I'm terrified of heights. Mary wants to go out there on that U-shaped thing, whether it's about 4,000 feet straight down. I said, you go on it. I'm not going. I don't even want her on it. So get away from that.
Tell me later what it looks like.
Ooh, ain't no way I'm going to get on that. Anyway, here's the whole point. The reason it cannot start with Cyrus' decree, and the reason people think it starts with Cyrus' decree, because when you go to the 44th chapter of Isaiah, here's why they think it starts. And as I said, people don't think God's word is exact. If you look at Isaiah 44 real quick, but hold your place here, and well, you don't need to hold your place. Isaiah 44, when Cyrus drives up the Euphrates to come in and conquer Babylon, we've gone through that. Verse 28, that saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, because he's going to liberate Israel from Babylon, and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem. Now, we're talking about, this is around 712 BC when this is written. Jerusalem doesn't fall until 586, does it? This is 174 years before Jerusalem falls, where this prophecy is given. Cyrus is prophesied by name 174 years before he marches down the riverbed. Is that the sovereignty of God? And shall perform all my pleasure, and Cyrus shall say to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. And they say, see? Cyrus said the temple will be built. But the problem is Cyrus never gave a decree. And the decrees of the Persians and the Medes were unchangeable. They were unalterable according to Daniel, the 6th chapter, when Daniel was thrown in the lion's den. We went through that. Cyrus never gave that decree. Besides that, if the decree began here in 538, and you add 483 years, moving toward Messiah the Prince, you add 483 years, or subtract that from 538, that takes you to 55 BC. There ain't no way it can. You ain't even going to get to Jesus, are you? Well, not only that, when you see when I say 586 BC, and I say 538 BC, and I say 522 BC, we are using a Gregorian calendar. We're using a solar calendar. We got 365 days in our solar calendar. They had 360 days in their lunar calendar. 360. And they get that. We went through this before. But the Jews get their days from Genesis, the 1st chapter. Genesis, the 1st chapter. The evening, 6 o'clock, and the morning are the first day. So they say, because the Bible mentions the evening and the morning are the first day, it mentions evening first. They said their day began at sundown or 6 o'clock in the evening, right about where the sun was going down, to 6 o'clock the next evening. And where they get their 360-day year, and in the 70 weeks of Daniel, I brought it out once on a Sunday morning, I think it was recently. But go back over here to Genesis You cannot understand this unless you go to Genesis, the 9th chapter. Oh, excuse me, not Genesis, excuse me. Genesis 7 chapter, that's what I meant. Genesis 7. This is where they get their 360-day year. In verse 11, the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day the fountains of the great deep were broken up. The largest rivers in the world are under the crust of the earth. It's not the Mississippi or the Nile or the Amazon. It's under the crust. And the earth went, just broke up. And the windows of heaven were open, so nobody had a chance to run up to the ark. Noah was sitting there in his backyard, no rivers anywhere nearby, and all of a sudden the ark went whoo like that. Probably about 5,000 feet in the air, all of a sudden. And the windows of heaven were open. So this is the 2nd month, the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, right? You go over here to chapter 8. The waters returned from off the earth continually after the end of the 150 days, and we see that in verse 24 of chapter 7. The waters prevailed upon the earth in 150 days, right? And the ark, verse 4, the waters were 150 days on the earth. Verse 3, chapter 8, the waters were 150 days on the earth. You verify that from verse 24, chapter 7, verse 3 of chapter 8. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. When did the fountains of the great deep break up? 2nd month, 17th day of the month. And the ark rested, and the waters went down the 7th month. That's the 17th day of the month. So that's 5 months, isn't it? 5 months, 150 days, 30 days to a month. 5 times 30 is 150. So you got 30 days in their month. 30 days, 30 times 12 is 360. That's where they get their 360-day year. Now that's important because what you have to do is you're going to have to back up for every one of these. When we say 538, we're talking about a Gregorian calendar. We're talking about a solar calendar. So we have for every one of these years, every one of these 483 years, since their years have only got 360 days, we got to subtract at least 5 days per year, right? So you take 5 times 483, right? So that gives you 2,415 days. You take 2,415 and you divide by 360, and that gives you 6.7 years. So you got to subtract you got to back up 6.7 years from 55, and that puts you further away from Jesus, doesn't it? So that puts you at 61.7 BC or 62 BC. How in the world can you start at 538 BC with the first decree and you can't even get to Messiah the Prince. You can't get within 62 years of his birth, much less when he's coming into Jerusalem. You're still now over 90 years away from him coming into Jerusalem, aren't you? And of course, it can't be Darius' decree, that second decree of Darius here, because when you start with Darius, his decree is in 520. It was in the second year of Darius, the second year of Darius that the decree was given. And you take off down there and you go 483 years. And that takes you to 37 BC. These are all about the temple. That's about building the temple, and supplying the temple. That gets you to 37 BC. And you got to back off 6.7 years, and that puts you at 43.7 BC or 44 BC, doesn't it? So that second decree only gets you to 44 BC. It can't be the second decree. I don't know why these guys can't add this up. You understand what I'm saying?
How did you go from 37 BC to 43?
You take the 6.7 years and back up, because these are 365-day years. So you got to back up. You got to back up 5 days per year for the 483 years. 5 times 483, and you back up 6.7 years, and that takes you to 44 BC. And it can't be this one. This one is obviously just to supply the temple. It can't be that one, because when you get to Artaxerxes' third decree, the first decree is in Ezra, the 1st chapter. The second decree is in Ezra, the 6th chapter. The third decree is in Ezra, the 7th chapter. This one is, the first decree is in 538. The second decree is in 520. And this one's in 457. 457. Well, you go down here, you take 457, and that's going to take you past the birth of Christ. But it's only going to take you up to, add 453, move ahead from 457 BC, 483 years. That's going to take you to 26 AD, but you got to back up 6.7 years off of that. So that takes you to 19.3 AD or 20 AD. Well, that ain't when Jesus come into Jerusalem, is it? He hadn't even started his ministry at 20 AD. How can he be Messiah the Prince? But let me give you one other thing. When we get to the final decree, found in the second chapter, and there's another way to figure this. Well, I got to give you something I didn't tell you. When you move from 457, you go forward 483 years to 26 AD. When you get to the birth of Christ, BC to AD, there is no year, so you subtract 1 year off of that. There is no year. 2 seconds BC, 2 seconds BC, and 2 seconds. Here's a little bit of Mike's calculus, or his subtracting minuses. 2 seconds BC to 2 seconds AD is how far apart? 4 seconds apart. 4 seconds apart. There is no time between BC and AD. They meet at the birth of Christ. So you don't have a year there. You have no year there.
So you lose.
Well, you don't lose a year. You just...
On the calendar.
Before the birth of Christ, when you get to the birth of Christ, you're at 0. You know? Yeah, that's right. That's right. You get at 0. You get to 0 and you start again.
They'll use the Roman calendar.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to show you that. Now, we're talking about the fourth decree. This is where the 70 weeks of Daniel begins. We've talked about these 3 decrees. I've got it in great detail in the previous tapes. It has to be the fourth decree. How much time do I have, Mike? Okay, got some time to get going here. Let me get a drink of water. All right, now. I don't mean this. I'm going to tell you something. God dealt with my heart about 1964 to start studying the 70 weeks of Daniel and prophecy. I've spent no small amount of time. You won't hear this message. There's not a church in the United States that's preaching this. Nobody. There are a few professors that preach at it. It confuses them, but you have to understand the Old Testament to understand it. I speak foolishly. I'm telling you, I don't think you know, even when I say this, you're hearing something a lot of people that hunger after prophecy would love to hear. And they don't know where they can find it. And they buy books. I've got a dozen books on the 70 weeks of Daniel, and I disagree with most of what a lot of them say. I like these 2 books here. But the only thing I disagree with them on, they're dispensationalists, and I don't agree on the very end of things. Mr. Honer, Harold Honer, Chronological Aspects of the Life of Christ. He's a brilliant man. He's THM, THD, Dallas Theological Seminary. Got his PhD at Cambridge University, chairman of the Department of New Testament, Literature and Exegesis at Dallas Theological Seminary. Now, I don't agree with his dispensationalism. He's not going to intimidate me at all in the conversation, but he knows a lot more about dates of things I haven't studied as much as he has. But I agree with some things and I don't agree with others. I hate the dispensationalism. I wish he didn't believe that. And Alvin McLean, he's also a dispensationalist. But they've got a lot of good things on the 70 weeks. You have to learn, even reading these kind of books, you have to learn to glean out what's good and leave the bad. And that takes a lot of evaluation. And the only way you can do that, the only way you can do it is by studying Old Testament till your brains fall out and stuff them back in and keep doing it. That's the only way you're going to be. You cannot evaluate. I have people that write to me and write letters to really correct me real hard. And some of them be very bright people. But they hadn't studied enough to know what they're doing. And they'll twist things and they don't even know they're twisting. And that's really, really bad because they don't know what they're doing and where they're going. That's a big explanation. Take me all the rest of tonight and tomorrow. I'll go into it. I'll just say the word dispensation is the word oikonomia. Oikonomia is the word dispensation. Dispensation. And dispensation is also the same exact word as stewardship. Comes from oikos and nomos. Oikos is the word house or family law. It means the law of the household. It means to dispense the law of a household. We're God's house. Dispensationalists believe time is divided up into periods. Adam lived in innocence, and then man lived in conscience under Noah, and they lived under the law, under Moses, and they lived under human government, and then you had this so-called age of grace, and then you had the tribulation and a pre-trib rapture, and 1,000 years after this is over, and the pre-trib rapture takes the church out, and the Jews are dealt with during this tribulation period, and that's all a bunch of garbage. It's a fairy tale is what it is. It's just not true. Huh? It's definitely not biblical. What it does, it divides the Jew from the church. All right, now, we're going to talk about this fourth decree. The fourth decree is given here in 444 BC. There's 4 decrees. Remember, I want to keep reminding you, when a decree was given by a Persian king, and the only people who gave these decrees were Persian kings. It was given by a Persian king. It was unalterable. It couldn't have been changed by the king himself, not 5 minutes after he made it. Once he distributed it, once he wrote it down in writing, and each one of these decrees were given in writing. We remember that Cyrus, in the last few verses of 2 Chronicles, the 36th chapter, he put it in writing to build a house in Jerusalem. Then Exodus, the 1st chapter, he put it in writing to build a house at Jerusalem. In Exodus, and Ezra, did I say Exodus? Ezra, the 6th chapter, Darius the king, reaffirming Cyrus' decree, since it couldn't be changed, it couldn't be altered. All they had to do in the 6th chapter of Ezra was find a decree that Cyrus had originally written, and it could not be changed, and he did. And Israel had an enemy named Tattenai, and Darius said, if you don't assist Israel in building this temple, I'll cut your house. He said, I'll take timber off your house. I'll hang you on a tree. That meant to run the tree up the rectum and out their mouth. And he said, I'll plow your house up and make it a dunghill. Now, you got that, Mr. Tattenai? He said, get over and help them build that temple now. And boy, did he jump, did he hop too. And that, huh? Yeah, he was going to, yeah. All right. Now, then in Ezra, the 7th chapter, that was the 3rd decree given by Artaxerxes. That's where Ezra a descendant of Aaron, the high priest of God. Aaron was a high priest. Ezra was a high priest, a descendant of Aaron. And Ezra gets the third decree. That's about supplying the temple. And he comes back over here. And we talked about this last week. And he finds Israel all involved in intermarrying with these pagans. And Ezra is distressed and distraught. Now, Ezra's decree is in 457. Ezra. This is given to Ezra. This is given to Ezra by Artaxerxes. And then the one before that is 520. That was given by Darius to confirm the first decree. That was in 538 BC by Cyrus. And the reason he did that was because they got so much opposition from Tatnai, they quit building in 536. And for 16 years, they did nothing. 16 years. And God raises up Zechariah and Haggai to tell the people to get back busy building the house of God. And this one is in Ezra, the 6th chapter, 6. This one is in Ezra, the 1st chapter, and also in 2nd Chronicles, the 36th chapter. This one is in Ezra, the 7th chapter, Ezra 7. And Artaxerxes gives this. But I'm calling your attention, 457 is the third decree given by Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes' father was Xerxes, or Ahasuerus. That was another name for him. Xerxes, one of the most famous years of the Persian Empire, was where Artaxerxes ascended the throne of Persia. He ascended the throne in 465 BC. That's very important, understanding this fourth decree, because the fourth decree comes in Nehemiah, the 2nd chapter. Let's go over there to Nehemiah. Not the 2nd chapter, but the 1st chapter. I've already got all this down, a lot of this. I quickly just threw some of that in there. I've got it down on tapes for the last, I don't know how many weeks we've been on this, 10, 12 weeks. You can't teach the 70 weeks of Daniel in one night. Forget that.
What'd you say, Gil?
1st chapter of Nehemiah. 1st chapter. Ezra and Nehemiah were dear friends because Ezra is a priest of God, and Ezra gets his decree from Artaxerxes in 457. Nehemiah gives his decree in 444. So there you are. You're 13 years difference. They were very close to one another. They were dear friends. They believed God. They both had tremendous desires for truth and holiness and godliness. And you'll see these two men working together in the book of Nehemiah. Let's go to Nehemiah, the 1st chapter. Nehemiah, the 1st chapter. Let me turn over here. Which Bible do I want to use? Use my old Bible. All right. Nehemiah, 1st chapter. Well, I might need my new one too. All right. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. And it came to pass in the month Kislev. Kislev is our month, December. Now, let me write this on the board because this is important. I'm going to move this out of the way. Leave that up there. In the month Kislev, or December. Or December. All right. Now, there's a little bit of division as to whether this is 444 in the 2nd chapter, 444 BC, or 445 BC. I don't really care which one you pick. Now, Mr. Alvin McLean says it's 445 BC. Honer says it's 444 BC. And I'll show you before it's over with why they say that. And I'll show you why the 70 weeks has to start with with the fourth decree. We've already eliminated first, second, and third degree, hadn't we? Besides that, the Bible itself said they were concerning the temple. And when they're in each one of these are written down. Anytime a Persian king wrote down a decree and distributed through the land, it was law. He couldn't change it. The men that came after him couldn't change it. As long as the Persian Empire stood, it was there permanently. No change. Now, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hekeliah, and it came to pass in the month Kislev, or December, in the 20th year. Now, we're in December in the 20th year, and everyone is in agreement that this is the 20th year of Artaxerxes. Now, Artaxerxes begins reigning. Xerxes dies in 465 BC. Artaxerxes starts to reign. 20th year has got to either be 445 or 444, right? Has to be. Xerxes, another name for Xerxes, was Ahasuerus. He was the king of the book of Esther that Esther was married to. She was Mordecai's cousin. Yes. Xerxes. So Xerxes was the father of Artaxerxes. Now, it appears to me that Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes are righteous men by the things the Bible says about them. And Nebuchadnezzar was a righteous man. It looks like we may see these guys in heaven. Now, if this is the 20th year in the month Kislev, you're in December. In December. Now let's keep reading and I'll come back to that. That Hanani, one of my brethren, came, and he and certain men of Judah. Since it says certain men of Judah, most of the writers actually believe that Hanani was Nehemiah's literal brother. If it was just talking about brethren from Judah, it would have called all of them brothers. And I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity. Now you have to understand, Nehemiah is in Babylon. And some men are coming over here from Judah to Babylon. It's about 750 miles. You have to remember, they didn't have satellites and TV. And man, for a word to get 750 miles, it might be years before you'd hear something going on over here. Unless you had people going back and forth all the time. So Nehemiah is over here in Babylon. He is a cupbearer. He's the same thing. You remember the butler when Joseph was in prison? And he interpreted the butler and the baker's dreams. When you look up the word butler, it means a cupbearer. The cupbearer of the king was the most trusted man. Artaxerxes dearly loved Nehemiah. He's trusted. The cupbearer brought him his cup. Boy, that's it. If there's any poison, you had to really trust a man. And sometimes that cupbearer would ask to drink of something before the king. And Nehemiah, without hesitation, would drink. So if the king was going to be poisoned, it would be the cupbearer that died first. And the cupbearer was like a brother to the king. That's what Nehemiah was. He was like a brother to Artaxerxes. Isn't it amazing how that these men, Daniel and Nehemiah and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they rose up in favor and drew high favor from these Persian kings?
Because of their righteousness.
Because of their righteousness. That's the point. When we live righteous, even it reminds me of over there in Luke the 16th chapter when the Bible says, make unto yourselves those people who are lovers of the mammon. It doesn't mean lovers of money. It doesn't mean bring them to you. It means when you're honorable and you forgive them of their debts. Look at that real quick. Just quickly. This is what this reminds me of. It goes with it. In Luke the 16th chapter, a lot of people don't know what this means, and this will help you to understand it because Nehemiah and these guys were so close to these Persian kings. Luke 16. He's talking about, he says, make yourselves friends of the mammon. He didn't say make friends with mammon. He's talking about a man who's forgiving people. He's a steward, and he hasn't been doing his job, so he's going around and he starts saying, how much do you owe this Lord? And he says, so many talents. He says, well, pay what you can and we'll forgive you the debt. And he gets on down here and he says, verse 8, the Lord commended the unjust steward because he had done wisely by forgiving these people the money that they could not pay, and say, pay what you can. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. And I say unto you, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness. He didn't mean make friends of mammon. He says, make to yourselves by forgiving debt and showing them that money doesn't matter. That's what he's saying. And what he's saying is, they'll trust you more than they'll trust their own kind.
They will receive you into everlasting heaven.
That's right. They'll receive you. Everlasting, of course, can mean as long as they're here upon the earth. They'll trust you more than they'll trust their lying friends. Because they know you're honest. That's exactly the way. That's what, when it says make to yourselves, it didn't say make friends with mammon. Make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness. Make them to yourselves because you're honest and straight. And that's exactly what Nehemiah did. That's what Ezra did. That's what Daniel did. Those people knew Daniel would tell the truth. He didn't care what happened.
Read verse 11.
Well, I've done flipped away. Well, I'll get it. So this is the same thing that Nehemiah, this is the same thing that Daniel did. All right. All right. If therefore ye have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And the true riches is mercy and grace. We're rich in faith. I heard some stupid charismatic get on TV tonight. So this is not talking about what people say it's talking about. If God can't trust you with money, how's he going to give you the money when it gets big? You lying thief. Now, let's get back over here to Nehemiah. Nehemiah made to himself, and just like Ezra, just like Daniel, they didn't care. Man, Joseph. When Joseph stood before Pharaoh, they said, this man will tell you the truth, even if his life depends on it. Joseph said, I will not lie. And the king said, this is the kind of man we need to distribute all of this 7 years of good and to store it up. I need a man that's honest. Joseph wouldn't bow before the king. He said, I won't bow before you. I bow before my God. The king said, I like somebody that honest. He said, let's put this man in charge. So he made to himself friends of the mammon. That's what it's talking about. Now, let's continue reading. Hanani, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. He's not talking about escaping. He said they were of the captivity. They had gone back over to Jerusalem, and Nehemiah was getting the word about what was going on in Jerusalem. Well, of course, we know that the only thing that's built up to this point is the temple. They may have makeshift wall around Jerusalem. They did not have the wall of Jerusalem. Forget that. They may have had some tents out there, but the only thing they had built in Jerusalem when Nehemiah is getting this word, and Nehemiah's in 444, and we're talking about 586 when it was all destroyed. And the only thing they've rebuilt so far is the temple, isn't it? That's all through these previous decrees. How much time, Mike? Oh, man, I need more time than this. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity there in the province of Judah, talking to Nehemiah in Babylon, are in great affliction and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem also is broken down. Well, it's been broken down since 586. It has never been rebuilt since 586. There's never been a decree given, has there? So it's kind of like these guys have been over there. It's been so long since the words come over to Babylon, it's like new bad news to Nehemiah. And the gates thereof are burned with fire. Well, who burned the gates of Jerusalem with fire? In the 36th chapter of 2 Chronicles. Nebuchadnezzar in 586. This is a long time before. They're all discouraged. What's happening? These men are bringing the message back. We're so discouraged. We got a temple built. It's been over 100 years since we've had a city. We're depressed. The gates are still burnt to the ground like Nebuchadnezzar burned them. Over 150 years before. And they're still on the ground. And it came to pass when I heard these words that as I sat down, I wept. Nehemiah's heart is broken. And mourned certain days and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And I said, I beseech thee, O Lord God of heaven, the great and terrible God. How's that for a word for God? I thought God's a loving God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns. Gosh, I hate that song. Don't y'all hate that? No, I hate it. A bunch of teenagers singing that and they know nothing about awesome. When you say awful, you don't say that was awfully good. Our English teacher in high school would say, what do you mean it's filled with awe? I ate that cake and it was filled with awe. The great and terrible God that keepeth covenant. What? What? Why did he say keepeth covenant? They're over here in Babylon and he's keeping covenant. How's he going to keep covenant with Israel when he's scattered them over here over the face of the earth? He's got them in Babylon so he can fix that land and get the house of God built and get Jerusalem rebuilt so they can send them back to worship. But he's going to harden their hearts because he wants the elect church. Did Israel fall? Romans 11:11, just simply to fall? No, they fell so salvation would come to the Gentiles. And mercy for them that love him and observe his commandments. The only people who can get mercy from God are the ones that go back and rebuild the temple of God. Let thine ear now be attentive and thine eyes open that thou mayest hear the prayer of thy servant. And then Nehemiah begins to pray, and it sounds like Ezra in the 9th chapter, and it sounds like Daniel in Daniel the 9th chapter. And he's crying out to God. I love Nehemiah. He's one of my favorite people of all the Bible. I guess I like him because he had so much fire. People think I am mean on TV. When you look at me, you think I'm hard. Nehemiah's the toughest man in the Bible. He would come up and grab you and pull your hair out and punch you in the face for doing the things to God's law that you do. Because he does that in the 13th chapter, doesn't he?
What is that word in love in Hebrew? What is that word in love?
I hadn't looked that up. I have to look at it. It's going to be the same word as agape in the new.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. Like you were saying how Nehemiah used to do the people and stuff.
Did he what?
I said, like you were saying how Nehemiah used to do the people.
Yeah.
That was before Jesus came, right? Because he said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it was, my servant then shall fight.
Well,
Would they have something to do?
Jude, this is a long explanation we're getting into. It's going to be a real long explanation. I'm going to get to it if you'll give me time. Yeah, he's talking about the kingdom of God after the handwriting of ordinances were nailed to the cross. We're dealing with literal Israel back here. Literal Israel. We haven't come to the spiritual, see. And God's going to pass the mantle to the spiritual because these people don't come back and because God arranges in their hearts not to come back. And boy, that's sovereignty of God. And how can you understand that? Let thine ear now be attentive and thine eyes open that thou mayest hear the prayer of thy servant, which I pray before thee now, day and night, for the children of Israel, thy servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against thee. Boy, it sounds like Ezra, doesn't it? It sounds like Daniel. We've sinned, Nehemiah says. Both I and my father's house have sinned. He says the same thing Daniel says and the same thing Ezra says. We have sinned. He didn't leave himself out. We have dealt very corruptly against thee. We never kept your sabbatical years. We oppressed the widow and the orphan. We ignored your statutes and commandments. And that's why you destroyed us. And have not kept the commandments, nor the statutes, nor the judgments. Boy, that takes you right back to Deuteronomy 28, doesn't it? So he's going to empty your womb, your basket, and your store. which thou commandest thy servant Moses, remember, I beseech thee, the word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, if you transgress, I will scatter you abroad. How many times did he say it, scatter Israel? And Nehemiah is saying this, having been part of the dispersion, the diaspora, having been scattered. He's over here in Babylon. He said, you said you'd do this, and you did it, and I'm over here, and I am living proof of it. You scatter us abroad among the nations, but if you turn unto me and keep my commandments. But that ain't going to happen because God's going to fix their hearts, isn't he? And do them, back to Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26. Notice how all this ties together. It's all a part of the same picture, isn't it? Though there were of you cast out unto the uttermost part of heaven, the uttermost part of heaven, Israel. Heaven, the heavens was the ruling class. To the uttermost part of heavens, Israel is cast out. Great distance from their land. Yep. Yet will I gather them from thence. I'll gather the heavens from where I scattered them. And will bring them into the place that I have chosen to set my name there. All of a sudden my mind goes straight to Ezekiel 36. He said, you had no pity for my name. I'll have none for yours. I won't pity you. And he said, I scattered you, and then I'll bring you back. He says all of that in the 36th chapter of Ezekiel. Read that chapter. Now these are thy servants and thy people whom thou hast redeemed by thy great power and by thy strong hand. He's talking about Israel being scattered. You've redeemed us. You're going to bring us back. O Lord, I beseech thee, let now thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant and to the prayer of thy servants. And notice he wasn't asking for a herd of camels in here anywhere, or a bunch of tents they could rent out, or some investments in ships on the Mediterranean. He's asking for God's prosperity, who desire to fear thy name and prosper. And it's not talking about money. I pray thee, thy servant this day, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, for I was the king's cupbearer. He said, I'm the king's cupbearer in the court of Artaxerxes. Now, look in this next chapter. This is where you find the fourth decree. This is where the 70 weeks of Daniel begins. And it came to pass in the month Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. Whoops. Remember, he starts off the first chapter. It's in Kislev, the 20th year of Artaxerxes. And you get to the second chapter, and it's in Nisan. So you're jumping from Kislev, when he gets the message, to Nisan, March, April. March, April of Nisan. Now I'm going to explain this. Nehemiah is a Jew living in the capital city of Babylon, the capital city of the Persian Empire. The Babylonians and Persians reckoned the regnal year, R-E-G-N-A-L. Regnal year. The Persians and the Babylonians reckoned the beginning of a king's reign from the regnal year. Regnal means the year of his reign that he ascends to the throne. They all use the same calendar. The Jews and the Babylonians use the same calendar. Their year began in Nisan, but he says it's the 20th year. It depends on whether Nehemiah is looking at this from a Jewish perspective or from a Persian perspective. It all boils down to that as to whether it's 444 or 445. Because, let me read something to you here. How much time do I have?
4 minutes.
I don't think I'm going to be able to read this. Let me just put it this way and then I'll read it. When a Jewish king ascended the throne, remember I said a part of something was the whole this morning, synecdoche? the Jews, if you ascended the throne in Kislev or December, they would start reckoning everything back from Nisan, and they would say that the first year of this king would be from the previous Nisan to the following Nisan, or the previous March, April to the following March, April. Well, Nehemiah is a Jew. It depends on how he means this. But he's living in Persia. And the Persian kings reckoned their regnal year from the following Nisan. They started, it didn't matter if they'd been reigning from Kislev to Nisan, they didn't even count that. You understand what I'm saying? If they started reigning, let me put it this way. If they started reigning in December and they reigned up to April, they said their first year was the following April on to the next April. They said that was their first year. They didn't count this.
It's all about the kingship.
We're talking about when they said a king started reigning. The Persians and the Babylonians did not count the months that he started reigning prior to March, April. That was like 3 months, free.
December didn't count.
Not as far as Babylonian Persian kings were concerned. But the Jews, Nehemiah being a Jew, the Jews, if you started reigning in December, they would say your first year started with Nisan. A part of the year was the whole year. You see what I'm saying?
That's 444, 445.
Yeah, and that's where you get to. And when you've got, it depends on whether Nehemiah is dating this according to his reckoning as a Jew or to the Persians' calendar as Persians.
You're thinking that he's reckoning as Jewish.
I've wrestled with this so many times.
Is there anything in Ezra that's going to help since they're...
Let me read something to you. For example, in Daniel, he says, it has been alleged, wait a minute, is this it? Yeah, that's it. It has been alleged that such historical inaccuracies occur in Daniel as to, see, this is where a lot of people get inaccuracies, as to render it likely that the author lived much later than the events described. For example, in Daniel 1:1, look at Daniel 1:1. Look at Daniel 1:1. It'll take us till next week to get back to that first decree. Daniel 1:1. This is by Gleason Archer, great writer. This is Gleason Archer's A Survey of Old Testament. Brilliant man. Daniel 1:1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, this was the son of Josiah, if you remember, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. This is in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim. All right. It is stated that Nebuchadnezzar invaded Palestine in the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, whereas Jeremiah 46:2, go to Jeremiah 46:2. Jeremiah 46:2. There's much to be learned through all this. 46. Now, Daniel, first chapter, says it was in the 3rd year. 46:2. Hold on. Read 1 and 2. The word of the Lord, which came to Jeremiah the prophet against the Gentiles, against Egypt, against the army of Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, which was by the river Euphrates in Carchemish, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, smote in the 4th year of Jehoiakim. Daniel 1:1 says it's in the 3rd year. Well, see, atheists like to get a hold of things like this. Say, see, your Bible's all messed up. There's only one problem. Let me finish reading this. Whereas Jeremiah 46:2 says that the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar was the 4th year of Jehoiakim. Since the Chaldean conqueror became king upon his father's death, in the year that he invaded Judah, there's a discrepancy of 1 year between Daniel and Jeremiah. Oh, goodness, let's throw our Bibles away and quit. I quit. More recent investigations, however, have shown that the Jews reckon their regnal year from the first month preceding the year of the session, which was Nisan. Reckoning the year as commencing in the month of Tishri, or the 7th month of the religious calendar. This would mean that 605 BC would have been the 4th year of Jehoiakim, who came to the throne in 608. The Babylonians, however, reckoned the first regnal year from the next succeeding New Year's Day in Nisan first, that is, the 1st of Nisan. So Daniel is speaking from a Babylonian Persian viewpoint, and Jeremiah is speaking from a Jewish viewpoint, because Jeremiah is backing it up to the previous Nisan, and Daniel's pointing toward the following Nisan. So if you don't know this, you're not going to know how to answer these guys that are come up and say, there's a contradiction in the Bible. Or are you? I'm out of time, but I'll give you one other thing here. And then I'll come back to the first decree. Look over here in 2 Kings. Let me see here. Where's that? Yeah, 2 Kings. Go to what's her face here. Hold on here. Ahaziah. Let me find what's her name. Athaliah. Okay, Athaliah. Athaliah. Hold on a second. Ahaziah. Got to find Ahaziah. Hold on. Where he reigns. Huh? Okay. Huh? 2 Kings 8. 2 Kings 8. All right, now, let me see here. Now we've got to go to 2 Chronicles 22. 2 Chronicles 22, 2 also. 2 Chronicles 22, verse 2. All right, look here. I'm going to show you this. All right. All right. Go to 2 Kings. I'm going to show you something you need to understand. 2 Kings 8 and 26. 2 and 20 years old was Ahaziah when he began to reign, and he reigned in Jerusalem. Reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. Look here. Ahaziah. Right there. The son of Jehoram. His mother was Athaliah. Right? She was married down there. Then when he dies, she tries to kill all of her sons. Her husband's dead. So she tries to kill them all. So it says he was 22 years old in 2 Kings when he began to reign. And he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri, king of Israel. Omri only in the sense that Ahab was the son of Omri. Yeah. No, Omri was a heathen. She was actually Ahab's daughter, but they would say the daughter of any of the men before her grandfather. They used that term. Now look over here in second. Now, he was 22 years old when he began to reign, right? Now go over here into 2 Chronicles, the 22nd chapter. Verse 2. 42 years old was Ahaziah when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri. It says he started reigning 42 years old here, and it says 22 over here, doesn't it? Well, you have something called co-regency. A co-regent, you remember Belshazzar wasn't the king. He was a co-regent of his father. It depends on what chronicles that they were looking at to pull this out of what historical chronicles. Ahaziah, in all probability, was set up when he was 22 years old to be his father's co-regent and to be king. And then his father dies, and at 42 he becomes the complete king. But you have to know what a co-regent is. Without knowing co-regency, you're lost. And people will pick this kind of stuff up and say, see, your Bible's got contradictions in it.
Regency and regnal.
Yeah, you got to remember that, yeah.
Learn a whole new culture.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot more to this. If you go into the pulpit commentary and look at 2 Kings, the introduction, your brain will fry in 15 minutes and you won't be able to know what in the world. And there's much of this, but like we said this morning, without Jewish culture, forget understanding anything. Well, I'm out of time. I'll come back to the 2nd chapter of Nehemiah, and we will go into the 4th decree, and absolutely that's the beginning of the 70 weeks of Daniel, 70 weeks. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word and for truth. God, help us to continue this message. There's so much, Lord, I want to impart to the folks here before I die. I pray that you'll just let me live many years if it's according to mercy. Keep me in good health, Lord, not for my sake, Lord, for this flock. Lord, raise up some men here to get into this message and to desire it. Make them to see that it's going to take more than a year or two, Lord. It takes a long time meditating on your word. Thank you for this truth. We praise you for it. Glorify you in it. Lead us to your elect. Open up many opportunities. Lord, I'm ready to lay my life down for this truth. Open up the doors for this message through the TV. It seems to be our best avenue right now. And we give you praise for everything. In Christ's name, amen. Keep listening to this and it'll get straight in time. Huh?
If I give you some more of these, will you take them?
Well, yes, I will. I promise.
10 3 times a day.
10 3 times a day.
And let me know when you're running out and I get.
Okay. I will do it. 10 drops.
Really help with the hay fever.
Do I put it under my tongue or what?
Put it in juice.
In juice.
Orange
Okay.
juice is best.
10.
Anything that has a high vitamin C content.
10 3 times a day? That won't last any time.
Well, there's like 400 drops in it.
Okay. 10 3 times a day. What are you doing?
How you doing there?
What's going on?
Good. Quick question about I'm trying to get the numbers down right. Where you got the 483, like 6.
Well, you got 5 days per year less in a Jewish year, and these are Jewish years. Mm-hmm. So you have to take the 483 and multiply it times 5, and that'll give you the number of the days. You got to subtract. So you divide that by 360. You take 5 times 483, and 5 times 483 is 2,415 days. This is what you got to. This is the number of years you got to subtract from each one of those years. We take 2,415 days divided by 360, and that gives you 6.7 years. So each time you figure out one of these decrees, here, let me just give you a copy of this. Just take a copy of this. In fact, I'll give everybody a copy of it. I don't care.
Out the street, stuff like this. And that's all the places I found day of preparation.
Oops.
Okay.
I don't know if that ain't very dark. That'll do it. That'll do it.
Thank you, sir.
Pass these out to some people. I'll go over here and I gotta wash my hands. There. Here. I'm gonna get some more of these for everybody. That's the first decree, 538, 483 years. Takes you to 555 BC, and then you take 483 years. You got That's 483 solar years. So you take 5 days per year.
Right.
5 times 483 is 24 and 15 days. You divide that by 360, and that gives you 6.7 years. You subtract that, back that up. 6.7 backwards from.
Right.
You just add.
Jewish time.
Yeah. That's as far as it'll get you.
Okay.
And this is right down here is what we'll go through next week.
Okay.
And he's making some over there. Oops, wait a minute. There. That'll do it.
Get any more of the swastikas?
Yeah, I've got some. I got one over here. Just a second. Let me wash my hands.